What if I told you some moments in history lasted only minutes, but changed the world forever? A ship believed to be unsinkable, a city erased in hours, a disease that wiped out half a continent. These are not just tragedies. They are turning points that reshaped civilization. From the Titanic to the Black Death to 9/11, these are the moments that changed human history forever. In 1912, the world watched in awe as the RMS Titanic prepared for her first voyage. She wasn't just another ship, she was the pinnacle of human engineering. Massive, luxurious, and filled with the wealthiest passengers of the era, Titanic represented the confidence of a new industrial age. Newspapers called her a floating palace. Her builders believed she was so advanced that many people began referring to her as practically unsinkable. On April 10th, Titanic departed from Southampton, England, beginning her maiden voyage to New York. On board were more than 2,200 passengers and crew, from millionaires in grand suites to immigrants hoping for a better life in America. Everything about the ship symbolized progress. Electric lights, elegant dining halls, and technology that many believed had conquered the dangers of the sea. But beneath that confidence was a critical flaw. Although Titanic carried lifeboats, there were far fewer than needed for everyone on board. At the time, maritime regulations required only a limited number based on the ship's size, and Titanic technically met those rules. Still, it meant that if something truly went wrong, hundreds of people would have no way to escape. For 4 days, the voyage went smoothly across the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. Then, late on the night of April 14th, everything changed. A lookout suddenly spotted a massive iceberg directly in the ship's path. The crew reacted immediately, ordering the ship to turn and engines to reverse. But the Titanic was enormous, and momentum could not be stopped instantly. The iceberg scraped along the ship's starboard side, tearing open several compartments below the waterline. At first, many passengers didn't realize what had happened. The ship barely shook. Music still played inside the grand halls, but deep below the decks, icy seawater was already pouring in. The truth quickly became clear. Titanic was going to sink. Crew members began preparing the lifeboats, but confusion and disbelief slowed the evacuation. Some boats were launched half empty, while many passengers hesitated to leave the warmth and safety of the ship. Within less than 3 hours, the impossible became reality. The unsinkable ship broke apart and disappeared beneath the freezing Atlantic. More than 1,500 people lost their lives in the icy water that night. Only a few hundred survived long enough to be rescued by the nearby ship Carpathia, which arrived hours later to a haunting scene of debris scattered across the dark ocean. The tragedy shocked the entire world. Investigation soon revealed major failures in safety standards, communication, and emergency planning. As a result, international maritime laws were rewritten. New rules required enough lifeboats for every passenger, and organizations like the International Ice Patrol were created to monitor dangerous icebergs in the North Atlantic. The Titanic began its journey as a symbol of human progress, but it ended as a powerful reminder that even the greatest achievements can fall victim to overconfidence. And yet disasters caused by human mistakes are only part of history's darkest moments, because sometimes the earth itself unleashes forces far beyond human control. Long before modern disasters were recorded, one ancient city experienced a catastrophe so sudden that it froze an entire civilization in time. At the foot of Mount Vesuvius, the Roman city of Pompeii thrived. It was a vibrant place filled with bustling markets, elegant villas, bathhouses, and busy streets. Wealthy Romans came here to relax, enjoy the coastal views, and escape the crowded capital. Thousands of residents lived ordinary lives, running businesses, raising families, and building a prosperous community. But beneath this peaceful city, a powerful force had been quietly awakening. The people of Pompeii were used to small earthquakes. Minor tremors shook the region from time to time, but they had become part of everyday life. No one realized these tremors were warnings from the volcano towering above them. Then, in the year 79 AD, everything changed. Without warning, Mount Vesuvius erupted with unimaginable power. A massive column of ash, rock, and gas blasted miles into the sky, darkening the daylight. From Pompeii, the eruption looked like a towering cloud spreading across the horizon. At first, many residents didn't understand the danger. Ash and small stones began raining down on the city, covering streets and rooftops. People tried to protect themselves inside their homes, believing the eruption might pass. But the situation was about to become far more deadly. Soon, the volcano released pyroclastic surges, superheated waves of gas, ash, and volcanic debris moving at incredible speeds. These burning clouds rushed down the slopes of the mountain toward the city. There was almost no time to escape. Within moments, Pompeii was overwhelmed. Buildings collapsed under the weight of ash, and the deadly waves instantly destroyed everything in their path. Thousands of people were buried where they stood, in homes, streets, and public buildings. In a matter of hours, the entire city disappeared beneath thick layers of volcanic material. Over time, the bodies of Pompeii's victims decomposed, leaving hollow spaces in the hardened ash. Centuries later, archaeologists filled those spaces with plaster, revealing haunting shapes of people in their final moments, frozen in fear, trying to protect their loved ones. For nearly 1,700 years, Pompeii remained hidden beneath the earth. When it was rediscovered in the 18th century, it provided something extraordinary, a perfectly preserved snapshot of ancient Roman life. Streets, artwork, homes, and everyday objects remained exactly where they had been on the day the city vanished. Pompeii was no longer just a lost city. It became one of the most powerful reminders of how quickly nature can erase even the most thriving societies. But not every catastrophe strikes in a single day. Sometimes disaster spreads slowly, destroying lives year after year until an entire nation is changed forever. Not every disaster arrives with an explosion or a sudden wave. Some unfold slowly, quietly, until millions of lives are changed forever. In the mid-1800s, Ireland depended heavily on a single crop, the potato. For millions of poor rural families, it wasn't just a common food, it was the foundation of survival. A small plot of land could produce enough potatoes to feed an entire household for a year. For many people, the potato was the thin line between life and hunger. Then in 1845, something invisible arrived. A microscopic organism known as Phytophthora infestans, a destructive plant disease, spread across the island. It thrived in Ireland's cool, damp climate. Healthy potato plants that looked perfectly fine in the morning could turn into a rotting black mass within days. The harvest began to collapse. Farmers watched helplessly as entire fields were destroyed. In the first year alone, nearly half of the potato crop was lost. But the worst part was that the disease didn't disappear. It returned again and again in the following seasons. Soon, millions of people had no food. Even though Ireland produced other foods such as grain and livestock, Much of it was still exported abroad under strict economic policies. Meanwhile, families across the countryside were starving. Landlords began evicting tenants who could no longer pay rent, forcing countless people out of their homes. Desperation spread across the country. Soup kitchens and public relief programs were created, but they were far too small to handle a crisis of this scale. Hunger weakened entire communities, and disease quickly followed. Illnesses like typhus and cholera swept through the starving population. The result was devastating. Hundreds of thousands died from hunger and disease. At the same time, millions of others made the painful decision to leave their homeland behind. Families crowded onto poorly equipped ships heading for North America, hoping to find survival on the other side of the Atlantic. Many never made it. These overcrowded vessels became known as coffin ships because so many passengers died during the journey. By 1852, the impact of the famine was clear. Ireland's population had fallen by nearly 25% due to death and mass migration. Entire villages disappeared, and communities were permanently scattered across the world. The famine left a deep scar on Ireland's history. It reshaped the country's population, politics, and national identity for generations. Even today, the memory of the famine remains one of the most defining tragedies in Irish history. But while this disaster unfolded over years, some catastrophes strike in a matter of minutes, unleashing a force so powerful that entire coastlines can be erased in an instant. On the morning of December 26, 2004, the coastlines of the Indian Ocean looked peaceful. Families were enjoying the holiday season, fishermen were heading out to sea, and tourists were walking along sunny beaches. Nothing seemed unusual, but deep beneath the ocean floor, something enormous was about to happen. Near the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, the Earth's tectonic plates suddenly shifted. The movement triggered one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded, measuring 9.1 on the Richter scale. The seafloor violently lifted, displacing a massive amount of water in seconds. That movement created something far more dangerous than the earthquake itself. A series of enormous tsunami waves began racing across the Indian Ocean in every direction. In deep water, these waves were barely noticeable, moving at the speed of a jet airplane. But as they approached the shore, they began to rise higher and higher. Along many coastlines, people noticed something strange. The ocean suddenly pulled back from the shore, exposing the seafloor in a way no one had ever seen before. Fish flopped on the sand, and curious onlookers walked out onto the exposed ground, unaware that this eerie calm was actually the final warning before disaster. Moments later, the horizon changed. Instead of a normal wave curling toward the beach, a massive wall of water surged forward. The tsunami slammed into the coastline with incredible force, sweeping away everything in its path. Entire villages vanished within minutes. The waves struck 14 countries, including Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, and even reached the eastern coast of Africa, thousands of miles away. Homes, roads, bridges, and communication systems were instantly destroyed. People had almost no time to escape. In many areas, there was no warning system to alert coastal communities about the approaching waves. By the time people realized what was happening, the water was already rushing toward them. The destruction was staggering. More than 230,000 people lost their lives, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters in modern history. Millions more were left homeless as entire communities were wiped off the map. In the aftermath, the world responded with one of the largest international relief efforts ever organized. Aid workers, governments, and humanitarian organizations rushed to help survivors rebuild their lives. But the disaster also revealed a major global weakness. Unlike the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean had no tsunami warning system at the time. After the tragedy, countries around the region quickly worked together to create a monitoring network designed to detect earthquakes and alert coastal populations before future waves arrive. The 2004 tsunami became a powerful lesson. It showed that while nature's power cannot be controlled, preparation and cooperation can save countless lives. Yet, some of the darkest chapters in human history were not caused by earthquakes or volcanoes. They were caused by decisions made by people themselves. Not every tragedy in history was caused by nature. Some were the direct result of political decisions that changed the lives of entire nations. In the early 1800s, several Native American nations lived across the southeastern United States. Among them were the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole peoples. These communities had well-organized societies, farms, towns, and governments. Some had even adopted written constitutions and aspects of European American culture. But none of that protected them from one growing pressure: land. White settlers were rapidly expanding westward, and the fertile lands of the Southeast became highly desirable. As demand increased, the U.S. government began pushing for a policy that would remove Native American nations from their ancestral territories. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act into law. This legislation gave the federal government the authority to relocate Native American tribes living east of the Mississippi River to lands far to the west, in what is now Oklahoma. While the policy was presented as a form of negotiation, in reality, it quickly became a campaign of forced displacement. Some tribes resisted legally. The Cherokee Nation even won a major case in the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled that their land rights should be protected. But the ruling was largely ignored, and removal efforts continued. Between 1831 and 1838, tens of thousands of Native Americans were forced from their homes. U.S. military units and government agents gathered families into camps before sending them on long marches toward unfamiliar lands in the West. The journey was brutal. People were required to travel more than 1,000 miles, often on foot. Supplies were scarce, shelter was limited, and many travelers were already weak from poor conditions in the camps where they had been held. They walked through freezing winters and scorching summers, carrying what little they could manage. Disease spread quickly through the groups, and hunger and exhaustion took a heavy toll. Many elderly people, children, and families simply could not survive the journey. Thousands died along the way. The routes used for these forced migrations eventually became known as the Trail of Tears, a name that reflected the immense suffering experienced by the people who were driven from their homes. Those who survived arrived in the new territory with almost nothing. Entire communities had been uprooted,